Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. This show is made possible by the McPherson Tax Defense Group, 1-800-BEAT-IRS, beatirs.com. That's BEAT, IRS, fighting the modern-day Gestapo. We have with us Philip Wegmann. Philip Wegmann is with the Daily Signal. Of course, that's the online publishing arm of the Heritage Foundation. Philip is a graduate at Hillsdale College. He also was a radio producer after graduating from college with the Federalist, did some writing for them as well, and is now the congressional correspondent for the Heritage Foundation's Daily Signal. Philip, thanks for taking time to talk to us about Obama's State of the Union address.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Really appreciate it.
It was hard for me to stomach this thing last night. I watched part of it, then I shut it off, then I went back to the DVR and listened to most of it again. So much of what he said was just entirely outlandish. You, along with Melissa Quinn, who's also been on this program before, wrote an article that pretty much takes the president's task for the misstatements. I would call them lies that he's made. What was the biggest from your perspective?
Well, I think that when we look at the president's speech, what strikes us is that he's not really trying to lay out an agenda for any future landmark legislation. He's just trying to defend past policy achievements. And I think in last night's speech, he really reverted to some of these older talking points that he's repeated several times. And so it kind of made our job as journalists, fact-checking some of this, kind of an easy job last night.
So what are the biggest misstatements? Would it be on the Obamacare issue?
Yeah.
The jobs issue? I mean, he talked about global warming. There's a whole host of things that he said that kind of pricked my interest as to, okay, yeah, there he goes again. But which would you think, are they all equally outlandish?
Well, it was an hour-long speech, and then he hit on a lot of topics. But I think that one of the things that the president has probably received a lot of pushback on is his claim that 18 million Americans have gained coverage under the Affordable Care Act. And, while more than 8 million Americans actually have gained coverage, a lot of those signups are actually a result of Medicaid expansion. And that comes not so much as a result of Obamacare, but rather taxing the Medicaid system that's already in place. And we've seen go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, and not only that, it doesn't talk about the net. I mean, there are a lot of people that have lost health care. I mean, a lot of people have had benefits reduced substantially. A lot of people have seen premiums just skyrocket. And most analysts, many analysts at least, say that's correlated with the Obamacare program. So he's not really giving a true picture, even if it were Obamacare rather than Medicaid expansion that gained those 18 million.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of folks who get their insurance through their employer or are just going as individuals to the private market, they're seeing their premiums skyrocket and their deductibles increase. I think one of the reports that I was reading the other day shows that in 49 of all 50 states, you're seeing increases in the cost just to receive health insurance. So while it's true that some folks have gained health insurance as a result of the Affordable Care Act, that's really a selective soundbite that he's throwing out there. Because when you look at the trouble with the Medicaid expansion and also some of these rising premiums, it's a much more fuller picture than the president presented last night.
Well, and similarly on the economy. I mean, he's pumping up the economy when you look at the overall indicators, we're at a worse point now than we've been in a long time, and things don't appear to be getting any better except for oil prices going down. But as a net energy exporter, that actually hurts our country. What did he say about the economy, and do you think it was a proper reflection of where we're really at?
Well, I think that the president really tried to hang his hat on the fact that there are 14 million new jobs. And I think that one of his lines was that we've had the strongest economy in 2 years, the strongest 2 years of job growth since the 90s. And in fact, he also talked about how deficits are down. But when you take a closer look, that while unemployment rate has actually fallen, it doesn't take into account the millions of Americans who have just given up on finding new jobs and are out of the workforce and aren't being counted in those unemployment numbers. And then the fact that the deficit has increased or has decreased That's to say nothing of the fact that the debt continues to balloon. So this is another rather selective view of the economy and the budget and the debt.
I'm surprised you didn't comment on the fact that with China's collapse, there are now literally billions, tens of billions, by some estimates, hundreds of billions of dollars flowing into dollars. What a mess. So the military, I'll just touch on this briefly. I guess he trumpeted the strength of our military and how he's made it stronger, which is just laughable. I mean, the social engineering he's doing there alone is incredibly destructive, not to mention its impact on dissuading people from going in, but also to suggest that we've actually advanced military equipment. I mean, I just find that to be absolute laughable. I mean, he looks at expenditures rather than looking at real impact. And I would suggest to you, given the point that he made last night about the military, and it occurred, of course, hours after Iran captured a whole bunch of our soldiers, or our sailors, I should say. I mean, obviously, Iran wasn't too fearful of the military reaction. And of course, Iran, up until just a few years ago, was still considered third world. I mean, some may have advanced into the second world range, but regional power, nonetheless, doesn't really fear us to the extent they felt they had the right and the ability to go take our sailors. What about...
Well, really quickly, I just wanted to touch on that. From some of the conversations that I've been having on the Hill today with lawmakers, they're really puzzled why the president didn't include any mention of those American sailors who were captured. Well, he didn't even mention it in his State of the Union address. I think it was Cory Gardner from Colorado who actually suggested on CNN that they should delay the State of the Union until the White House and Pentagon could issue a statement and declare kind of what was going on. Of course, those sailors have been released today, but there's still a lot of confusion. I mean, was Iran emboldened because of this nuclear deal? That's what a lot of Republicans are saying. Or was Iran, did they only give our sailors back because they didn't want to scuttle this nuclear treaty that they've worked on for so long? That's what Nancy Pelosi and a lot of the Democrats have proposed. So
the Persians are expert negotiators. They realize that Obama wants the deal worse than Iran wants the deal. And, Obama certainly did not want to put this front and center by delaying the State of the Union, because then that's egg on his face, that his partner for peace went out and kidnapped our sailors. I mean, come on. I mean, it is a disaster, this deal that's getting ready to go down, the transfer of billions of dollars back to Iran so that it can continue to fund terrorism. It shocks me, but of course you look at the president's reaction to other crises that we face, where, of course, the pictures are all over them golfing during certain crises. So this seems to be kind of part and parcel of what he has done under other circumstances where Americans have been under the gun or actually killed. He just acts like it doesn't even occur. I think it's from a kind of a perspective that he wants to, reduce these things to a level that he doesn't actually have to take concrete action. Kerry, by the way, I guess there was a comment on CNN I saw that Kerry had made that apparently he felt that his relationship, or it may have been a past statement, that his relationship with the foreign minister of Iran was so strong that they were convinced that the sailors were going to be released very quickly. And perhaps, I guess this would maybe be the administration's position, that to make a public spectacle out of it could disrupt those behind-the-scenes efforts. But I agree with you. I think it's inexcusable that the president didn't make at least mention of that during the speech, or even delay the speech.
From what from some of the conversations that I've had with lawmakers, they're confused why two parties who are negotiating a treaty, who have interest at stake, would allow something like this to happen. That's the real question here. And I think that when you look at the president's lack of a response, again, this is because he's in the legacy building stage of his career. If you look at the Iranian nuclear deal, that's the most significant foreign policy achievement that the White House would point you to. So it was just bad timing all around, I think, for the president last night.
Well, Glenn Beck would argue that the reason the president didn't want to delay the State of the Union was because he advanced it to this early date so that he could actually have another last State of the Union. You have any opinion on that?
Well, I haven't heard anything about a round two of the State of the Union, but some of the members were joking at town halls that I visited. They were joking that they were going to be able to get this out of the way early on. And I think there's something to that. The president's last State of the Union was yesterday, and going forward now Republicans can go to their retreat in Baltimore later this week and really work to craft their policy agenda to respond. So it's almost as if they're turning the page, and Paul Ryan and the rest of the GOP caucus is now finally ready to respond. That's the sense that I'm getting.
We've got to wrap up the segment, but let me comment just briefly on the global warming thing. Apparently, Obama made the statement that the planet is at stake, and that 2014 was the warmest year on record until 2015 turned out to even be hotter. What's your take on his assessment of where we're at on global warming and the administration's solution there, too?
Some scholars actually have serious questions about the data that is recorded and represented there. For instance, some of these weather stations that record this data are actually in industrial areas. And so you have buildings, highways, pavement reflecting the sun, and that can skew a lot of these measures. So it's not as if these are perhaps the most accurate measures that they have. In fact, one of the weather stations that's really been prominent in recent days is the Washington D.C. weather station that was used in this report, like many of the other weather stations. And that weather station is actually by the D.C. airport. So you have all of the exhaust and all of the heat reflecting actually skewing those numbers. So
right, and then even when the NOAA is confronted with this, they don't move them, they keep them in place. It's just amazing. I talked to a weather guy the other day that said that the whole thing is just skewed. And then he goes on and talks about wind-generated electricity. I mean, it's just hogwash. I mean, there's absolutely no way that you can make a justification there without the tax credits. And Philip, I really appreciate your insight on this. We got to close out this segment. Philip Wegmann wrote a great article. We'll have that up tonight at joemiller.us on the State of the Union. Its issues, its fact issues. Stay with us at Joe Miller Show. Be right back.